This is UMass basketball.
I know this. I'm the most animated coach that you've probably ever seen in my team.
Thompson in the front court. Thompson will lay it in. And one.
Hey, he's just being Frank.
And that's right. It's time for another episode of Just Being Frank. I'm Jay Burnham alongside head coach Frank Martin and a special guest this week joining us from New York City, CBS Sports college basketball's hungriest insider, the one and only Jon Rothstein. Jon, thanks for being here today. How you doing?
Good. Great to be with you guys.
What do you think about Frank's attire as we get into this, as we start things off?
He looks casual. He looks calm. He looks like he's enjoying the final days of August before we transition to another basketball season. But I guarantee you this, Frank Martin will not be dressed like that the first day of practice.
You know, Frank, did you dress up today? I just want to start this off. You literally just got back to the Mullen Center here in the Champs Center because you were hanging out with Julius Erving. Did you dress up for him? I mean, were you ready to meet a guy that you idolized?
I mean, if you call this dressing up, I mean, you know the way I dress to work every day: t-shirt, pair of shorts. I'm a basketball coach. I mean, and I'm past my days as a runway model, so it's I'm comfortable. But no, yeah, I did. I was going down to the Hall of Fame in Springfield, and he was in town for a function. They consider him the adopted son of the Hall of Fame in Springfield.
Right.
And, so just through mutual friends and John Believa, who runs the Hall of Fame, they arranged for us to spend about an hour together. And it was him being a UMass grad. I tell people all the time, Jay, I'm married to a UMass grad. So I understand with this university, what people, athletes that graduate from here, the impact that it makes in their lives. And so being around him, when he played here 1969 to 1971 or 72, because his freshman year he couldn't play. So he only played 2 years, sophomore, junior year. And the way he still speaks about Jack Lehman, it's like the power that the impact that a coach can make in the life of a young person. Here's Julius Erving, who's basketball, Fish to Safe Pittsburgh, the ABA, the NBA, the 76ers, and he's talking about Jack Lehman like he's still 19 years old, getting ready to play for Coach Lehman. It was awesome, but it was a great time. And one thing I need to add, it's about John, and one of the reasons he's on this call with us, Jay. In the day of social media, there's a lot of guys that have a lot of opinions, but really don't work to create their opinion. They're just regurgitating the opinions of others. John works his ass off to see things firsthand, to understand the people, to understand the players, to have an opinion, because he goes to all these campuses. Like, I tease him all the time because I was trying to get him to come to South Carolina because he goes to all these campuses. He doesn't just call me and say, Frank, you got a good team? Yeah, I do. Okay. Hey, Frank Martin no, he actually goes in and sees it for himself. So he can generate an opinion that's valid with his own eyes and his own spirit based on that along with conversation. So having him on this call to speak about the A10, something that I know John cares about.
Yep.
And UMass and basketball and all that, I'm real thankful for his stuff.
I have a million questions for Jon on the social media front, but Jon, why don't we start here? We just heard about Frank talking about Dr. J. Where does your passion for basketball begin?
March 30th, 1991. My parents had plans with my mother's college roommate. They were going to go on a double date. I was 7 at the time, and I can probably count on one hand. My parents are now married 48 years, how many times they got into a really bad argument. But I remember that day, that my father wasn't ready to get into an argument, but he was putting his foot down to make a point. And he said, I'm not going to this dinner tonight. And it was about 5 o'clock on a Saturday. And I'd never seen him do that in my life. And And that day was the day that Duke played UNLV in the Final Four a year after losing by 30 in the national championship game. And at that point, UNLV was 34-0 and on a 45-game winning streak. And that was the game, to me, more so than even the game the following year when Duke beat Kentucky in the Elite Eight, when Leitner hit that shot. I remember more Christian Leitner's performance against UNLV because he made 2 free throws with 12 seconds left to break open the game. And ever since then, I've been hooked.
You've developed such a following, a personality, an identity, as Frank was referencing. So at what point in your career did you get going and saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do and this is how I'm going to do it? Because clearly social media played a big impact in how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, no question. And Frank knows this because Frank and I, have also done media together at CBS, several times over the years. And when you are not a former player and you are not a former coach in a studio type setting or in an on-air type setting, you have to bring a different dynamic. So I think when we were all growing up, the thought process was, well, if you're not a former player, if you're not a former coach, you have to be a writer or a columnist, and then you're going to kind of fill that role on TV. I have kind of thought that, the most important thing is to be authentic and to be yourself and really not be any different than you are on Twitter as you are in real life or on television. So I kind of said, yeah, obviously I'm going to be as thorough as I can. I need to know everything I can about everything, because if you are not somebody, again, as a former player or a former coach, you have to bring a completely different perspective. But I will never in a studio setting or in an on-air setting talk strategy, talk about things like that that's reserved for a coach or a player, because I don't have those experiences. But I do have the working knowledge of the sport. And I also try to, as you can probably tell, incorporate a lot of my personality. I love college basketball, but I also love eating pasta on Sundays. And yeah, if The Fugitive is on AMC, I'm going to stop and tweet about it.
Right.
It's Jay, just us coaches, we're very protective of our environment. And you name the coach in the country, they let Jon into their environment. And not everyone's welcome. But Jon is welcome in 99%. I'm not going to say 100 because nothing's perfect. In 99% of our worlds. The reason for that is because of what he just said. He's authentic. He's not trying to throw stuff against the wall. He's not trying to stir the pot to create division and negativity. But he studies the game. He understands the game. He generates a relationship, and he doesn't breach the contract, that unwritten contract that we have in life, which is called a relationship. He doesn't breach it, and for self-gain. And us, like I met Jon, like you saw, I didn't meet Jon through his Twitter personality. I met Jon as a basketball analyst at a TV studio. And my conversations with him about basketball behind the scenes, I was like, this guy knows basketball and he knows the people in basketball. And because it's easy to say, well, that guy made a jump shot, but can you understand why he got an open jump shot? And Jon comprehends that. And we put, Jon, the old saying that if you can't play, you coach. If you can't coach, you officiate. And if you can't officiate, I guess you do television. I got no idea, but it's fun, man. Because when I was a kid growing up, everyone knows the personality Dickie V.
Yep.
And Dick, if you have a conversation with Dickie V about cancer, about life, about the Tampa Bay Rays or college basketball, the same enthusiasm comes through in the conversation. You can have it in front of one person or a million people. It's the same conversation. Jon's the same way. And I think that's why Jon's become a personality in college basketball right now, that the people on the inside trust and the people on the outside believe.
Okay, so Jon, I think you probably answered this question in other interviews, but I need to ask you, because I have heard that you text every coach day of the game. Good luck. Is that true?
I have an app that's connected to my database that can send a message based on the college basketball schedule. But I probably text them on non-game days too, almost just as much, for the record.
Okay.
But I just have a database pretty much that's connected to a messaging app.
We are over 2 months away from the A10 schedule, so I don't expect you to break it all down. But
yeah,
we got you here. Why don't you give us your thoughts on the Atlantic 10 heading into this season?
Just a critical time for the conference. And, Frank and I have had a number of conversations about this, and I've talked about it. I've written about it, on multiple occasions. The Atlantic 10 as a conference is at a major crossroads right now. And I think if you look back a decade ago to this conference and what it was, this was a conference in 2013 that put 5 teams in the NCAA tournament. And after that season, where it put 5 teams in the NCAA tournament, the league lost Xavier, Butler, and Temple due to realignment. But the next year, despite losing those teams, the Atlantic 10 got 6 teams in the NCAA tournament, which was in 2014, which was as many as the ACC. That's when UMass was the 6th seed and lost to Tennessee when Conzo Martin was the coach. So I'm looking at the landscape of the league right now, and, these are just facts of life right now that I'm going to share with you. The Atlantic 10 had 1 team in the NCAA tournament last year. It was VCU. They won 27 games, and they were a 12 seed. That tells you that if they had lost in the Atlantic 10 tournament title game, they wouldn't have gotten in. Fordham, which has not been a strong program, throughout the history of college basketball, won 25 games. 24 of those wins were in quad 3 or 4. And Fordham, despite having a 25-win season, a dream season, was not invited to the postseason NIT. And here's another one I think we need to look at. The top 5 teams last year in the Atlantic 10, according to the net, played a combined 13 quad 1 games. That's it. And the top 5 teams in the Mountain West, which is a conference which I think for a long time was the West Coast version of the Atlantic 10, if we're looking at it from a non-power perspective, the top 5 teams in the Mountain West last year, according to the net, played 45 quad 1 games. So there's a lot of things that need to be tweaked and spruced up with the league. One of the biggest, I think, is going back to a 16-game league schedule. I just went through the data with you about how the top 5 teams in the league only played 13 quad 1 games last year. 2 years ago, the WCC put San Francisco in the NCAA tournament as an at-large team. And San Francisco that season, because of having the flexibility of a 16-game league schedule, was able to generate 10 quad 1 opportunities. The league has not been the same since it went from 16 to 18 games. And also, college basketball has changed too because more conferences are now playing 20-game league schedules. Now, people, and I've said this time and time again, when we talk about how the league needs to do more, because the league does need to do more, people need to understand when they use the crutch, well, we can't get as many power conference games. Based on the way to get into the NCAA tournament, we have a quad system. Now, what does that mean? For a quad 1 win, it's beating somebody at home 1 through 30 in the net. For a quad 1 win on the neutral court setting, it's 1 through 50. And an away game is 1 through 75. Even if you can't find the opportunities to play power conference games, there are still ways to craft quad 1 and quad 2 opportunities if you really get in the weeds here for the better teams in your conference. And this is something that isn't going to change until we see significant urge and urgency from the league office. And we also need to, in my opinion, do a much better job at marketing the brands and the coaches that are in this league. Frank's been to a Final Four. He's taken Kansas State to an Elite 8. Archie Miller took Dayton to the Elite 8. Fran Dunphy has been the coach of 3 schools in the Big 5. Mark Schmidt, pound for pound, is one of the best coaches in the country. But, and I've said this to Frank time and time again, the Atlantic 10's game on Friday night was a great thing prior to the Big East and the Big 10 making the decision to play on Friday nights. Because now all the Atlantic 10 is doing is cannibalizing itself. The Atlantic 10 needs to find better television windows and unique ways to separate itself. You guys see on Twitter all the time how excited I get when we have a standalone game. I remember being with Frank and Coach Huggins and maybe Andy Kennedy at the time when we were having a conversation. And Frank, I think Hugs brought this up. The reason why the NBA ratings often are so good is because they stagger the tips and they don't compete against each other on the same night. If I'm looking at the Atlantic 10 right now and I'm looking at the way things are structured, why aren't we playing a game from the Atlantic 10, their game of the week on Fridays, at 5 o'clock when there's no other games and having happy hour with the Atlantic 10? Why aren't we playing games on Saturday instead of going against all the major conferences? Why are we doing a 10 o'clock game, putting it on a campus and saying breakfast with the Atlantic 10? These are all things that the three of us could solve in a bar that would give the something unique and, again, authentic that we're not seeing in college basketball.
I think I'd be the only one drinking in that bar with you two. But Frank, thoughts?
That
was a lot. That was
no. It's because we have to work. We got to be very careful as a league right now. The Atlantic 10 has lost its national stake.
Yes.
And what I'm saying right now, I've said it in private to the leadership of the league office. Okay. So I'm not saying something that I don't have the courage to tell people beforehand. I think we've got a lot of great ideas and a lot of energy that we all understand the moment that we're in. I think college athletics is in a difficult spot. I mean, what Coach Pitino said the other day is something I've been saying privately, but I'm not trying to take credit for his comment. He's the one that shared it publicly.
Right.
All this realignment's all football driven. Why don't we, and the NCAA doesn't make any money off of football. Let them create their own leagues, their own championship like they have, and let them figure it out.
Right.
Let's, the rest of us kind of go back to normalcy from a conference standpoint. But I get the fact that's going to be more complicated than us three just talking. But the Atlantic 10, now think about this. There's a reason why we had the second most transfers of any league in the country. Because we have really good players.
Yes.
And they're not getting the platform to play on that Jameer Nelson and Marcus Camby and everyone else that, pick the guy at Temple that played for Coach Chaney,
Yep.
Pip Sanchez, whoever you want, not getting the same platform that those guys had before. And we got to figure that one out. Scheduling, like, John, let me ask you this. Jay,
Yeah.
because I got to say something about scheduling here. We're in a conundrum right now with scheduling. You see, UMass fans remember Calipari play anyone, anywhere, anytime. His whole shtick. Back then, everyone played 16 non-league games, so there were more non-conference games to be had.
Right.
The A10 is a league. When I was in the SEC, don't schedule the A10. No, you don't do home and homes with the A10.
Right.
So now we're not getting those kind of home games. And I've got friends from being in Power Fives all those years, and that their schedules are kind of made up. And the ability to squeeze another home and travel is not in play. And so I don't know how we fix that, because what you said is the argument that I've used behind the scenes. As a league, we're not getting enough teams with quad 1, quad 2, non-conference, which then doesn't give us enough teams in the league that are quad 1, quad 2 to play each other. So we end up having no quad 1, quad 2 games. And how to fix that, that's the, Jay, I sorry for the long answer, but
no. Well, I was just going to say,
John's point is the big problem we got is.
Let me toss two question informed to John from what you just said. John, that's by design, right? I mean, that's how the largest power conferences are trying to box out the mid majors and such. So that's a part of their design. And then two, we mentioned the football thing kind of driving all the realignment.
Yeah.
How what is your solution when you kind of look at the landscape?
I think Coach said, I don't think spinning our wheels on the football thing is a productive use of our time because there's so many things. But I think the A10 thing we can look at a little bit. I think we're at a point right now where we have to do a complete revamp of the Atlantic 10 to everything that we've seen with its media day to, again, the television schedule to going back to 16 league games. It needs to be completely revamped and spruced up, and it needs to be marketed completely different than it is right now. I have firmly said this, and, you need to find things and own them and be unique and be authentic. I have firmly said when you look at the Atlantic 10's geographic footprint, you have to find a place where you are going to be able to draw in people that you wouldn't be able to draw in. And I remember vividly when I started in this business, one of the big things that high-level coaches wanted to do was coach at the Palestra. This is like when the tail end of Fran Dunphy's tenure at Penn, he was able to get Bo Ryan to go in there with Wisconsin. He was able to get Roy Williams to go in there with North Carolina. So this is what I think needs to happen. The Atlantic 10 needs to, I would say, the first week of the season, because you want to do it maybe like in that, there's a million games Monday now, but then you have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the following Tuesday is the Champions Classic. The Atlantic 10 needs to rent the Palestra and find a television partner. I would love it to be us at CBS, but again, I'm not authorized to make those decisions.
Make it happen.
And the Atlantic 10 needs to put up its top 5 projected teams according to the net. And then we need to find who would come to play a game at the Palestra against an Atlantic 10 opponent if that team in the Atlantic 10 agrees over the course of the next 5 years to go back to the other campus twice. I can tell you this, and Frank knows better than me. I bet John Calipari and Tom Izzo to take a team to the Palestra would do it, especially with John Calipari's history in the Atlantic 10. If a power conference team, especially the ones that recruit Philadelphia, think about the University of Pittsburgh, think about Penn State and how big Philadelphia has been for those teams. Think about Steve Peichel at Rutgers. If we could do that the first week of the season, put it on television, market it completely different as the Atlantic 10 Invitational, and then the other schools would be getting 2 games back on their campus in the next 5 years. It creates something that the league doesn't have, which is a buzz around the preseason event, and it gives you an opportunity to have a situation where early in the season, your best teams that have a chance to make the NCAA tournament are being showcased. Guys, the 3 of us on this call know that the kid at St. Joe's, Eric Reynolds, is a terrific player, really good player. I don't know if anybody other than the college basketball junkie knows that. Let's give him a showcase. Let's give the fact that Deron Holmes came back to Dayton. He's a potential All-American. Let's give him a showcase. But just expecting things to change and continue to go through this with an 18-game league schedule, nothing is going to change. We're going to do a Zoom 12 months from now complaining about the same situations. But I think if we were able to find a hook that would get programs of ilk to come to a venue like the Palestra and then, again, agree to return twice in the next 5 years, all of a sudden, you're separating yourself from the other non-power conferences. You've created a buzz, and you're improving immediately the metrics of the top teams in your league according to the net.
Sign me up. You in, Frank?
Now you see, in context. So when John starts speaking on social media about that he don't do vacations because of basketball, now you heard the background as to his dad and why basketball's his deal. When his dad the one day said, I'm not doing it. Well, now when you see Chris Mooney at a press conference saying that we should hire John and as a consultant to create scheduling opportunities, that's why Chris says what he says at that press conference. It's John's got some great ideas, and I don't think I'm in a wrong here. I don't think our commissioner, Bernadette, I don't think she would get upset with me saying this because I'm not going against company line or company vision. On the contrary, we're all very engaged, starting with her. on trying to correct whatever's gone wrong so we can try to fix the league.
Yeah.
We have to create an identity for ourselves again. And, think about the cities, Philly, New York, Massachusetts.
Yes.
I mean, D.C., Richmond, Virginia, Dayton, St. Louis. Like, there's a reason the first four was picked to go to Dayton. It's a basketball city. I lived in the Midwest. St. Louis is a basketball city. Think about all these cities that we've got. We've got to figure out a way to utilize these cities, these basketball areas, to start being celebrated again from a college basketball standpoint.
John, a little background. Frank at least prefaces once per show that he's going to get me in trouble somehow, some way, and he's certainly heading us in that direction every single show.
You see me wearing the black hat, right?
That's it. Let me change course here. Can I do that? Okay.
Sure.
I was thinking about this morning, John. There's a Netflix documentary called, I think, Swamp Kings on the University of Florida football team.
My wife was watching it the other night. Yeah.
Okay. Did she have anything good to say about it?
No, she's 9 months pregnant, man. So she's just putting anything on
whatever she
TV that'll get us to the due date. Yeah, at this point, she's just kind of rolling through Netflix.
I'm giving you carte blanche over the Netflix budget. What you take that concept of a show, but apply it to college basketball? Where are you going, and what you got to do with it?
So just in terms of creating
a show about a kind of a dynasty.
Adapt or die. Adapt or die. I mean, the way things have been done for really the three of us, up until this point with traditions and, the way that you traditionally build a program, all that's, out the window. I mean, we are going to have now kids going to school in Seattle, Washington, and playing a league game in Piscataway, New Jersey. I mean, we're seeing a scenario now, and I hope it stabilizes a little bit once we get through the COVID year where, we have kids playing on 4 different schools in 4 seasons. I mean, and the big thing, too, that, I think about is, similar to Coach Martin, both of my parents, were educators and teachers, and my father was a guidance counselor. So there was always a big priority in my house on education. And the goal of the NCAA for the longest time was to have college kids and college students have the best athletic experience they could have while getting an education. With the way things are now, especially with, freedom of movement. And look, if you're for the transfer portal or against the transfer portal, it's here to stay. But it's really imperative for really the stability of our sport and for college athletics that, there's an elimination, in my opinion, of waivers beyond one time. If a kid wants to transfer one time, that's fine. I think it would help. And Matt Painter has talked about this, ad nauseum. If we really tighten the dates, if there's a 30-day window to go into a portal and commit, that would help things. But, we can have stability in our sport if kids can transfer 2, 3, 4 times and there be no penalty. One time, fine. And it would, within a certain date range, fine, we can have that. But for people who think that education and the best interest of the student athlete is a priority, I mean, they're crazy, because I've talked to so many staffs, and Frank knows this better than me because I'm not in the coaching business, who have seen kids, commit to a school and lose such a high percentage of their credits from the previous institution because they didn't transfer. And now all of a sudden they've gone to, a second or a third school, and they've set themselves back from getting a degree when only such a small percentage of these kids are going to play in the NBA. I mean, I talk, to some kids who want to get in the media, but they don't have a college degree. Well, I never finished school. It's like, well, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, we have kids here too. They're like, hey, they want to get involved, and then they're gone after 8 months, and you don't build those relationships with people at the school. So then you have to start over. I transferred 3 times when I went to college. So each place I went, I had to start over at the baseline of the college radio station.
No, transferring has become part of college athletics. And look, transferring is not a bad thing. I'm not against it. But the one thing that I think, you do see, and I'm curious if Frank sees this too, is, if you are a kid, and look, there are transfers who have had great experiences. So, it's not a bad thing. But I tend to find that if there is somebody who's been to 3, 4, 5 schools, they're the ones who don't really have a place to go back to when it's all over. When they're 26, 27, they don't really have a place to go if they want to go in the fall for a football game or go back to a campus. So that's something that, has really been part of the infrastructure of college sports, being, part of a strong alumni base. And it's not the same if you're playing on 3 or 4 schools in 3 or 4 years.
What made college basketball what it is right now, you can argue about Dean Smith and Kentucky and all that. Let's be honest here, because it's what drove me in the Big East in 1980, along with the 4-letter network. And every Monday I knew I was going to see Rolly Massimino, Big John, Louis, whoever, just keep going. All those guys that were in that Bayheim. But more importantly, the fans of those schools, because this is where it's different. They're not just fans of basketball, they're fans of their schools.
Yeah.
They knew that when they went to the game, Derek Coleman, if you were a Villanova fan, was coming in your building again. Right. You're a Georgetown fan, well, you couldn't wait to see Patrick Ewing and Sherman Douglas play against each other because of what happened the year before. We've lost that. And that's what worries me about college basketball as we move forward. I understand different times, but I don't think the fan bases are any different. Fan bases are about community, college fan bases, about communities and about their schools. It's not an NBA. NBA is a completely different fan base. And so I worry about all the moving around that we're losing. We're going to lose our substance, our shtick of what college basketball was, the identity that we had. Now, just like John said, it's you're not putting that genie back in there. It's out. We have to adapt to the moment that we're in right now to create an energy to maintain the level of college basketball so we've all known it. And that's the challenge. My whole thing is, and I've thought long and hard about this, because being on the NABC board, I'm forced into all these conversations with Izzo and Painter, guys that I share similar values to, that we've all come up in different areas, but under the same values. And we got into coaching for the same reasons. And now there's young coaches in the room that see things a little differently. So you create these conversations to figure out how to move forward. And where I'm confused right now, and I'm starting to flip. I used to be completely against making them employees. I had no interest in that. I'm starting to flip a little bit, because as long as NIL is being used in recruiting, and all three of us know that it's part of recruiting, there's no stability on our teams. So we can't, you're coaching your team and you're going to lose your player at the end of the year, and you think he's worried about how to rotate on your 2-3 zone, and when practice is over, he's on the conversation with 3 different people that are cutting deals to figure out what school he can play at the following year. And so we're going to have to protect the sport from that. Not transferring, protect the sport from that. And I don't know how we do it any other way other than creating a contract situation. You know, John, and I used to never say this publicly. I've started saying it because now the NIL, these opportunities are out there for the athletes.
Yeah.
Everyone always speaks about us coaches. We get up and leave whenever we want. No, we don't. We breach our contracts when we get up and leave. And when we breach our contracts, there is a hefty number that we have to pay. That's life. And I when I made the choice to leave K-State to go to South Carolina, I had to write a check that was not fun to write. And I had someone say to me, well, I guarantee you South Carolina paid part of it. Yeah, they did. And then I got taxed at 40% of that number. I had to write that check too. We're going to be in education, which is why Painter got into it, Izzo got into it. John, it's the way you were raised. It's why I got into it. Jay, it's why you're a part of this right now. If we're going to be into education, we've got to figure out a way to protect that formula. And I don't know how to do it right now unless we kind of lock them guys in for 2 or 3 years. That way, if they want to go to the NBA, they can. But at least you know that if they don't go to the NBA, they're going to be with you for at least 2 years.
I bet John knows how to do it. You got a solution for us?
there's so many layers to that. I just want to make sure we get this out. NIL has been a good thing for college basketball and for college sports because it was long overdue. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about too is NIL helps with continuity with rosters because now kids who may not have had a professional opportunity can come back and make money. But, because we have no guardrails on the NIL, which, we haven't had really a lot of guardrails on the transfer topic, the last 3 or 4 years either, we have no rules to follow. And I think that's something that, Coach Izzo has said time and time again. There's no rules. There's no manual for any of this. So, we're looking for answers and nobody has any. And I think that's part of the problem. If we just said, okay, this is what the criteria is to be able to do this within the lines, I think a lot of people would be happy. But because of, the COVID-19 pandemic, because of the times that we're in, nobody wanted to deal with anything where there was going to be any type of pushback. And rather than fight and try and, draw lines in the stand, we have seen really anarchy throughout college athletics for 3 or 4 years. And I think if a couple of things can be stabilized, we'll be in real good shape here moving forward.
It's hard to tell kind of where the NIL numbers are. In your estimation, what's a top level NIL payment for a player?
I mean, I don't want to speculate here on speculation, but I know this. I mean, there are college kids this year making significantly more money than either my mother or father made in their life in a year. Significantly more money. And, if you're talking about players at the highest level, like, a Hunter Dickinson or somebody like that, forget about it. Forget about it.
Where we've lost sight is we've made it all about the individual player's marketability. Their value has a certain number. But when they put a certain school's name on their chest, their value goes up. And we've lost sight of that part of every contract has this guy and this guy, and it's a figure out a way to merge. That's the way contracts work, and then keep you married through whatever comes in front of you. Well, right now, everything is about the player's marketability, which I'm all for. I started fighting for this when Jacob Pullen played for me. Jay, you've heard me say this. And they were selling T-shirts in the local department stores, that's local mom and pop places, because it's Manhattan, Kansas, so it wasn't market. You didn't have all the big stores. Everything was mom and pop places. They had regular white T-shirts with his kind of facial caricature with the beard, and it would say "Fear the Beard."
Right.
Our compliance people were forced to go in and tell them, folks, you can't sell that. You can't sell those shirts. So I was like, what do you mean they can't sell it? Like, it's created an identity for our basketball team. Fear the Beard. It was Jacob Pullen, Kansas State. No, you can't do it. So that's when I realized this is wrong.
Yes.
Jake should have been allowed to make money off of that T-shirt because the marriage of who he is and what he does as a player, along with the K-State fan base, has created value for both organizations.
Right.
And this is wrong. That's when I started in 2010. That's when I started fighting in the direction of the NIL, and I'm happy the NIL is in place. The most difficult thing that we as coaches have been thrown into, and believe me, Jay, if this is difficulty, I've lived a very blessed life, but it is the complicated part of our jobs right now. We're being asked to manage lawlessness, and that's hard to do right now because there are no rules. John just said it. It's the transfer situation, the NIL. Like, I have no idea who our guys are cutting deals with in NIL. I'm happy for them, but I got no idea. And I got to manage a locker room that one guy is the 18-year-old that walks in as a freshman is going to tell a 22-year-old senior, yeah, Frank helped me cut this deal. No, I didn't, but that's what he's going to say. That's going to create a conversation in the locker room that I have to overcome. Well, if you don't have those guys contractually locked in, you can't do it. But now here comes the problem. If you try to make them some kind of an employee, they're going to unionize. And once they unionize, college athletics as we know it is over. And at least that's what I think. I'm so old that I think that's where it's going when it gets there. And I'm like John, I'm not overreacting to all this. It's different. We got the waves are all over the place. We're just waiting for that wind to pass so that ocean can calm again. And once it calms, it'll settle at a different level, and then the ships will be able to sail, at peace again. And I'm in it to figure it out, but eventually there's got to be some kind of protection for the university, for the value of an education, things that matter. John, I don't do politics, and I'm not trying to drag you into politics. Jay does politics. I've seen what he does on Twitter. He gets into the politics. I don't. Yeah. But the rules of our land, of America, everyone argues that we can't set rules to benefit the top 3% of the earners.
Right.
That we got to change the laws to make them share with everybody else for the conveniency of everybody else, okay? Or the necessities, better word. In college athletics, we have changed the rules from where we used to do it for the benefit of everybody. Now we've completely changed the rules for the benefit of the top 3%. And now everyone's being asked to live in this world where the only guys that really, really, really benefit are the top 3%.
Yeah.
And it's complicated. And we're being asked to manage that dynamic. I'm okay with managing problems, but at least give me a set of rules that I know that when I manage my problems, the guy next to me is managing similar problems, not doing whatever the heck he wants to do.
And we need rules that are concrete. I mean, Frank, it's like the thing that I'm real curious, and I've been talking to people at the NCAA about this the last couple of weeks. What percentage of these two-time waivers are going to go through? Because if that happens, then pretty much, it's going to be like that scene in Jurassic Park when those dinosaurs flew through the glass ceiling and just started kind of like flying out into the park. I mean, and that was my thing. Like, that really took me aback. There was so much talk about putting in the one-time transfer rule, but the NCAA, even they say they're going to be more stringent, they opted still to put the waiver stuff in place. So we have a lot of.
Are they worried about a lawsuit on that, John?
There's probably some of that for sure. It's definitely about a lawsuit, and they don't want to be in the middle of that. But like at some point, I mean, we need to Frank should be able to know when he's sitting with his staff in April and he's looking at the portal and guys they're recruiting. Okay, if this guy opts to come here, he's going to have to sit out because he's used his one-time waiver. Like, that would be just so much more stable in terms of providing clarity for our game. And, here's another thing. When I looked up this statistic as well, redshirting is not a bad thing. I'm going to give you an example. In 2018 and 2019, Villanova and Virginia won the national championship those two seasons. They played a combined 16 players in those two national championship games. 9 of those players redshirted. 4 were first-round picks, and 2 were lottery picks. Think about what I just said. Over half of the players that played in those games on the teams that won a national championship redshirted. And I've been doing this now long enough. I'm, about 2 decades on this beat where, been going around the country, and you talk to people, and they say, when I redshirted, I caught up academically. I got my body in better shape. It was good for me to acclimate myself. There's a lot of positives with that. And if you look at all these guys at a place like Villanova, I'm just going off the top of my head right here, but I know this. Dante DiVincenzo, Eric Pascal, Omari Spellman, all of these guys, Mikal Bridges, redshirted. All of these guys sat out a year. DeAndre Hunter, the guy who was in the NBA, who was an integral part of Virginia winning a national championship, redshirted. It's not a bad thing. If a kid has to take a redshirt year as a transfer, it's not a bad thing.
John, to your point, my 2010 K-State team, the sixth man of the year was Jamar Samuels, redshirted as a freshman because he wasn't where he needed to be physically or academically. So he redshirted his freshman year. He wasn't ready, but he became sixth man of the year.
Right.
Well, my starting point guard, Denny Clemente, had basically been told, you got to leave the University of Miami. You can't be here anymore. If he had not redshirted, he would have not made the adjustments he had to make off the court, so then he can have success on the court. But because of the redshirt year, he could.
Right.
Just like Curtis Kelly, who was at UConn and didn't play at UConn. His fault, not Coach Calhoun's fault. his fault because of the way he was going about his business. Well, he comes to K-State. He takes that year to refocus himself and get away from some of those bad decisions. And now he plays. And now one guy sets a record for most points ever in a Big 12 game after being told in Miami, get away. And the other guy becomes an all-league player after never basically playing at UConn, and they told him to get away. But that redshirt year gave us three guys, main guys, became really good players and very successful people because they utilized that redshirt year to get better.
John, you've been pulling these numbers, I'm not sure out of where. It's been amazing. So I'm going to ask you to do a couple more.
Yeah.
Do you have any numbers now? I think I've seen some floating around about guys who were in the transfer portal who have not found a home.
I just saw what was floating around Twitter over the weekend. I think it's just under 50%. So, those guys, and this is, again, we're well beyond, saying that, it's something to get, it's something to get a free education with room and board and so on and so forth. But those, young men and women who entered the transfer portal, they were on scholarship last year. And what I'm trying to, paint the picture is this. It's not like, oh, well, they didn't find a place to play. In the landscape we're in right now in college athletics, with the money that certain athletic departments have, that means that their education isn't paid for. That means that their housing isn't paid for. That means that the training table meals that, college students get right now, like I went, my wife's a USC grad, so I went to go see UCLA practice when she went to visit some of her friends earlier in the summer. I mean, they've got at UCLA, they're on a deck in Westwood, and there's fresh salmon, there's salad, there's steak, there's chicken. And this is part of, the scholarship experience. If you went into the portal, you didn't find a home, you're losing all this stuff. That's why, it's a concern. Forget about the fact that you don't have a place to play or continue your education. All of this stuff, housing, meals, it goes away too.
Okay, that sounded like a plug for a West Coast school, but just to let you know, UMass Dining is #1 running almost a decade straight. So let me just need to plug that. And then my follow-up there was, you mentioned the red shirting. Do you think, is there a percentage that, for instance, 10 years ago, there was X amount of red shirt percentage, and has that number dwindled significantly?
Oh, it's definitely dwindled significantly. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would say less than 10% and maybe less than 5% of college kids redshirt. And the thing is this, everybody, and this is part of the waiver thing again, is in such a rush to get eligible. We want to be eligible right away because we don't really live in a society anymore where they understand the value of delayed gratification. And that's something that, I'm sure we've seen, in our respective journeys, and it's just part of life right now. I remember listening to a Bill Belichick press conference, when he had Brady. It was one of the runs. I'm a big reader, but I'm not a big fan of other sports other than college hoops. Obviously, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about it. But, somebody asked him, Belichick a question about any thoughts on, getting things together for another run and winning another Super Bowl. He's like, I'd like to have a good practice today. That was it. It's like the people who say well, I'd like to lose, 10 or 15 pounds. It's like, well, you have to have a good workout today, and you have to eat 3 really good meals and have a healthy snack, and you have to do it again tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. I was very caught up early in my media career at trying to get to certain places right away. And then I just kind of said to myself, you know what? If I go around the country and I put a suit and tie on and I watch practice, I'm going to learn more. I'm going to build relationships. And when I'm not on the road and I'm getting ready for a season, if I can talk to 2 or 3 coaches each day on the phone, at the end of every week, that's going to be 10 or 15 guys. If I do that for 2 months, I'm going to have notes from 100 coaches. I'll be better. And then all of a sudden, if you keep compounding that stuff, whether it's what I do or somebody else, you are going to be better at your craft. And I think we have a real, lack of understanding that, the key to life is consistency and who you are every single day. And that's part of the thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, because I see all these players, a lot of them, Frank, now, and Frank's been with me, on 57th Street, and I work with a lot of these guys. there are a lot of players I've worked with and now almost 15 years at CBS who really have a hard time doing television and understanding that, yeah, just because you were in a Final Four or an Elite Eight or a Sweet 16, you're not automatically going to be good at broadcasting.
Yeah.
You have to work at this like a completely different career. You can't just make a comment and say, well, when I played so on and so forth. No, you need context. It is a different career. And nobody, again, after a certain point, cares that you played X amount of years ago. They want to hear something with meat on the bone, and you have to work at it. It is a constant thing to work at a completely different career.
Frank, that sounded like a speech I've heard you give once or twice.
There's a rush to get to the finish line. And the problem is that all of us on this conversation right now, I'm not in a rush to get to the finish line, professionally or personally. That finish line keeps moving.
Yeah.
I'm not in a rush to get there, man, because when you get to the finish line, you know what's on the other side? The race is over. The race is over. But these kids, they're all this. I shall say kids. I got my children. My oldest is 24. My youngest is 16. That age group. We've created a world for them where they're more concerned with the result than they are with the journey and not being worried about the result. And I don't, it's like when me and my children have conversations about these things, it's like me speaking Spanish with you, Jay. Like you're going to sit
I'm
there,
learning.
what is he saying?
Right.
It's two different worlds. And so every time I enter those conversations, whether it's my children or my players, I take a step back and remove me and the way I learned to figure out how they learn and what motivates them so that I can try and share what knowledge I have to get them to be at peace with John's comment about Bill Belichick. I just want to have a good practice today, man. Stop worrying about tomorrow. Stop worrying about the paycheck. Stop worrying about 3 years from now. Just worry about today, man. Make today a good day.
And if I can add to that, to what Frank was saying, like the biggest thing that, I've learned is that when we have goals in our head, that this is all that we're chasing and that's all we want in life, once you get to that, you realize you're not going to feel more complete as a person. Frank, you were the only person to ever take South Carolina to a Final Four. If you beat Gonzaga, you're not going to feel more complete as a person. If you beat North Carolina in the title game, you know what you'd be thinking about? I got to get back there. That's all it is. It's all it is because things are always going to change. I remember Jim Calhoun said it when he broke through and won in the 99. He said the first thing he thought about after he won a national championship was how great would it be to win a second one. And that's life because, and again, my father told me this and I remember this, and part of my favorite quote book at the top of my list. As soon as you find out the answers in life, somebody else is changing the questions. And that's why we can't be concerned, all that. And it's important to have goals. It's important for us to take pride in our accomplishments and, and our vocations. But, it's about consistency and longevity and being the same person every single day. And then we live with the results as they come.
All right, let me wrap it up with this. You can catch out John's podcast, the College Hoops Today podcast. I think the most recent one was Auburn. You've been just churning through previews. It's awesome. You are well known for your Rothstein-isms. Is that the correct term to use? Okay, so you've applied a saying to a particular coach. I think the A-10 has several that have Rothstein-isms. Coach Frank Martin is one of them. Who was the first coach that was anointed a Rothsteinism?
Bo Ryan.
And what was it?
Bo Ryan. Death taxes, Bo Ryan.
Oh.
Says, the crazy thing just about Wisconsin, it's really, continued with Coach Gard is just they had these guys. And again, this is continuity and seeing a process. I'm going to look it up right now just to get it because they had guys at Wisconsin who wouldn't get in the game, but would get into practice or, you would just really be in practice and they would be marginal players. And then the next year you would see them in the starting lineup or in the rotation, and they'd be real Big Ten guys. And this is the example I want to use. As a freshman at Wisconsin, 2011-2012 season, and I'll go back to remember this, Wisconsin made the Sweet 16 that year and lost to Syracuse and Boston when they had Jordan Taylor. Frank Kaminsky averaged 1.8 points and 1.4 rebounds. He played 7.7 minutes a game. His senior year, he's the National Player of the Year. And I believe Bo Ryan, throughout his career, never finished lower than 4th in the Big Ten regular season standing. So that was the genesis of all this.
Is there a Rothsteinism that that you haven't been able to use publicly, or that didn't really catch on?
No, because I don't force them. And the fan bases get angry. Like Indiana wants one for Woodson. Gonzaga wants one for few. I don't have one for Kentucky. I don't have one for Kansas. So and again, it goes back to being authentic, because this is the thing that I've learned. And again, if you're not a player, if you're not a coach, you have to have content. You have to be, aggressive in the news aspect of this, for sure. But that stuff is all fleeting. We're talking right now about stuff that is, catchy and, obviously a quip on Twitter. And that's the stuff that I've learned, much like Dick Vitale, as Frank was pointing out earlier in this chat, that resonates more so than a news story or an element of something related to that.
Okay, so I have to ask you now, where did the incapable of submission come from for Coach Martin?
You know him pretty well. Frank, regardless of who he's matched up against, is not going to tap out. And I think that, and this is and this is not, Frank did not tell me to say this, and I'm not saying this because I'm friendly with Frank. When you think about what Frank has done in his coaching career and where he's taken the programs that he's taken them, Kansas State, Elite Eight, South Carolina, Final Four, those programs, with all due respect to them, are not synonymous with Duke, UCLA, Kansas, Kentucky. And that, I think, is the most impressive thing about Frank's career. And now, you could make, I don't think you can make the arguments, a fact of life. The most tradition-rich program that Frank has ever coached is the one he's currently coaching in UMass in terms of basketball history. And that's why we have to solve this dilemma with the Atlantic 10 Conference and find a way to get it back to, I don't know if you can get it back to what it was a decade ago, but the Atlantic 10, and I think Frank would agree, should have a floor, I think, of 3 NCAA tournament bids a year in this current landscape. I don't know if we can get back to what it was a decade ago, but the league has, good coaches, it has good brands, and it has really good players. And I think, as Frank alluded to it, look at where players who transferred from the Atlantic 10 last year had success. Look at where they transferred to. Ish Leggett, University of Pittsburgh. Noah Fernandez, Rutgers. R.J. Luis, St. John's. They're going to good programs, and now, we've got to find a way to rectify this situation. 2 more, Nicholas Kern and Ace Baldwin going from VCU to Penn State. We got to find a way to rectify this situation, and it needs to be rectified with urgency, and that urgency needs to be expedited.
Frank, parting thoughts?
That's why I asked to bring John on this deal, man, because it's what you and I speak about, and I can have certain opinions, and I'm, as a coach, some people are going to say, well, he's just trying to fight for UMass. I'm trying to fight. Yeah, I do fight for UMass every day, but I'm trying to fight for the sport that gave me a career. I'm trying to fight for education, which is what allowed me to grow as a human being. And I've seen so many young people succeed, not because of the NBA. This is year 40 on the sideline for me. A lot of my players have succeeded because of their education. Very few have succeeded because of the NBA. So I'm trying to fight for the stuff that I've seen the majority of my guys find success, which is the college experience. And and it's all I care about. It's I'm in it to try and figure it out, and we will. But to end it on your question to John, I don't lay down, bro. We will get up and fight. I'm not staying on my back. We're gonna get up and fight, and we're gonna figure it out, and we're gonna do that as UMass, or we're gonna keep the Izzo. I'll say this now. I got some teammates in Izzo, Painter, Lenny Akoff, Calipari. We got some teammates now that we're going to fight to figure out this college basketball situation.
When Frank's recruiting this fall, if he's on the road, he's got a long drive, and he wants to talk about the state of the game. If he's got 4 hours, there's nobody better to call than Izzo.
It's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. And he'll call it. It doesn't matter what it is. You know, he is so passionate, much like Frank is, and you know, I am to a lesser degree about. You're not just setting the kids up for now; it's setting them up for life. If they want to come back as coaches, if they want to, you know, get where they want to get, they have to have calluses, and that's the bottom line. And they have to get education. And here's another thing that I'm just noticing now. You know, I know this because, you know, I graduated college in 3 years, and part of the reason was because my student loans were so high, but that was a long time ago. It is getting so expensive right now for parents to send their kids to private education that, I mean, it's at least, you know, for some one child, it could be $250,000. So if these kids have an opportunity to use their basketball ability to get that taken care of, don't take that for granted. Get the degree, and then once you get the degree, they can't take it away from you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jay, I'll leave it at this. To quote the great Mike Tyson, it's all fun and games until you get punched in the face. And why do I say that? Well, you don't know how to get up unless you're put on your back. And the one thing that we know as we go through life is we're going to get put on our backs. You're not going through life standing on your feet the whole time. And are you going to have the scars, the callus, the will to get up? And that's what we got to teach these young people, that it's all fun and games. Being on social media is all fun, and all the attention that it brings, good and bad, oh, it makes you popular. You're going to get punched in the face. Now, when you get punched in the face, it's not fun and games anymore. And that's what happens to you. It knocks you down.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. John, hopefully we can do this again. He's Jon Rothstein. You can find him all over Twitter. He is indeed the hungriest insider in college basketball. He is incapable of submission. That's Coach Frank Martin. I'm Jay Burnham. Until next time, saying so long from Amherst.